From the CUBE studios in Palo Alto and Boston, bringing you data-driven insights from the CUBE and ETR. This is Breaking Analysis with Dave Vellante.
At the beginning of each year, as is our tradition, Erik Bradley of ETR and I dig through the latest data and we craft 10 predictions for the coming year. This year's batch follows some annual favorites and some new territory. Welcome to this week's theCUBE Research Insights, powered by ETR. In this breaking analysis, we put forth our top 10 predictions for 2025 with our usual data-heavy, data-backed opinions and prognostications. Erik Bradley, welcome back to the program. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I think this is our 4th or 5th year doing this, and every year enterprise tech just keeps getting more interesting. So I feel like we'll be doing this for a long, long time.
I hope so. So every year we get thousands of inbound predictions from tech companies, their PR agencies and thought leaders. Here's just a look at this year's inbound folder. I get out the yellow highlighter, I go through every one, and when we categorize them, and what we're showing here is the change in topic areas over the past 3 years. And remarkably, AI, while it's still prominent, it was second this year after cybersecurity. Now, in fairness, a lot of the security predictions involved AI, but it's notable that Gen AI last year propelled AI to the top category with 40% of the inbounds, and cyber, which dropped as a percentage of the total last year down to 30%, shot back up to the top at 40%. As well, you can see cloud and data center grew after last year's decline, which is kind of interesting and I think relevant. And surprisingly, data continued its downward trend. And I say that's surprising because there's not much you could do with AI without data. Now, we had several inbound predictions around DevOps, but fewer than in the past. And digital transformation, that was once the buzzword of the day, Erik. It's all but disappeared from the predictions narrative. And SaaS is still showing some life. As with cybersecurity, the SaaS inbounds were sprinkled with AI throughout. And then other remain noticeable with topics around edge, and public policy and social issues and the like. Now, most of the inbounds were more trends than predictions, but there were a few that stood out, and I just want to give you a taste. The email subject on this one was vendor predictions that don't suck. And Kevin, yeah, it was good. Kevin Cochran, who's the CMO of Vultr, I think we actually cited one of his predictions last year. He said that cloud innovation is going to die unless walled gardens are broken up and open up and followed by all hail. He had a prediction, all hail the sovereign cloud. And my reaction to that, Erik, is, we'll see. I think the hyperscalers, they're going to remain fairly walled gardens, but they got massive ecosystems that'll allow them to claim openness and choice. And they're going to get their piece of the sovereign AI pie too. I think we're going to talk about that as well.
Yeah, I'd say actually maybe more of an enterprise-focused approach to that, and instead of true sovereignty. But I think the public hyperscalers are still going to get their cut.
And then and then another standout was from Zen Coder CEO Andrew Falev, who predicted massive coder productivity increases via agents. And then this was beautiful. He said, culminating in a prediction that his mom will write her first software program in 2025. I thought that was pretty clever. Got my attention.
Hey, low code, no code, agentic AI DevOps is here already. So I don't know about my mom, but maybe his mom's a little bit more advanced.
Right, and there's a couple of more interesting ones in that DevOps category, even though it was lower than some of the ones we usually get. And one more from Arun Desikan of SonicWall. This was really interesting. You'll love this one. He predicts there's going to be a major cyber attack that uses Mission Impossible style impersonation enabled by modern AI. So think 3D face masks, voice modulators, adaptive contact lenses, and all designed to impersonate people. Erik, I hope not.
It's scary, it's sci-fi stuff, but we're really on the cusp of it, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. But I hope it's not true, but it's certainly in the realm of possibility.
Okay, let's dive in. Here's a glance at all the predictions in one chart. They span macro tech spending, security, agentic AI, cloud computing, edge, intelligent automation. We're going to talk about IPOs, data and jobs. And we're not going to spend much time on this graphic, but for readers of Breaking Analysis, it'll give you a quick overview of this year's menu. Now let's get into our first prediction. As usual, starts with the macro spending trend. So number one prediction, tech spending will increase by a little more than 5% this year. We've got this at 5.3%. Now, importantly, each quarter ETR conducts its TSIS survey, the Technology Spending Intention Survey, with ends over the course of this, this chart ranged from over 1,500 to more than 1,800. And they measure expectations. So we're going here back, all the way back to the COVID era, expectations on annual IT spend. So we came out of the isolation economy with very high expectations. The COVID bubble, 7.5% growth was the expectation. And that consistently decelerated. We got the war in Ukraine, and then the Fed started tightening. And that really drove spending down. And then we finished 2024 at just around 4%, a little lower than what we predicted last year, Eric. And then we're coming into 25 with a little over 5% growth, 5.3%. Now, the interesting thing, and Eric's going to elaborate on this, is large organizations are more conservative, down around 4%. CXOs are more optimistic, around 6%. And even though the Asia Pacific is a smaller sample, it's still, hundreds. And it's expecting significant growth relative to the average, Eric, at like 8%-ish, almost 8%. Your thoughts on the macro spend?
First of all, I'm just happy to see spending back up again. Like you said, we were up above 7.5% at a certain point of time. And then what I called the headline recession, or the Chicken Little recession, that just never really happened. Technically, we never hit it, but it was in the headline. It was in everyone's mindset every day. And it really kind of stopped spending for a long, long time. Now, there was the uncertainty of the election. There's certainly a geopolitical element as well, but we're kind of beyond at least the election point. And from everyone I'm speaking to, budgets have increased. New projects are opening up. And you're right, particularly the most large organizations, Fortune 500, Global 2000, are lagging that 5.5% number. SMBs are above it, already above 6%. Financials, insurance, and vertical is the highest, but we're seeing retail consumers still be very, very cautious. There's an inflationary environment. There are things they're still worried a little bit about, the consumers struggling. C-suite is the highest. We also have the management layer is more optimistic than the actual practitioners. So it's interesting to see this optimism start at the top and dwindle as we actually kind of go lower by title. And to your point, APAC is at almost 8% right now. Not the biggest group in our sample, but certainly big enough to be significant. So yeah, spending appears to be back, and I'm hopeful that in our next survey, we'll see a continuation of this.
Yeah, and it's confusing for a lot of people. Businesses like, predictability. And things aren't really that, clear right now. You got the Trump administration, President Trump saying interest rates are too high, inflation's got to come down. Okay, which is it? And so,
well, you have a business-friendly environment, right? So at least that was able to, when you're looking at your budgets, you say, okay, we're going to have a business-friendly environment versus a regulatory-heavy environment. So that was enough, I think, to get it kick-started. But you're right, there's still a lot of uncertainty. And being an ex-Wall Street guy, there's nothing more the markets hate than unpredictability.
And in APAC, I like APAC has been, kind of outperforming in your surveys the last couple of years. But then you see the AI, Diffusion Control Act, which is, targeting specifically Malaysia. And of course, companies like Oracle are building data centers in Malaysia. And so there's that other gray area. So it's going to take some time to work itself out. Hopefully, this quarter we'll have better visibility on all this. But our second prediction focuses on the top topic of the inbounds, which was security. And what we're showing here is we're predicting that despite the fact that organizations tell us that they can't reduce the number of tools in their security stack, this idea of platformization, we think, is going to continue to gain traction in 2025 and become a more prominent theme amongst buyers. Here in this graphic, we're showing net score or spending momentum by overlap or presence in the data set within the security sector. And Eric, it's both crowded and there's a lot of green, meaning spending on many vendors' tool sets continues. You can see Microsoft, they're so far up in the right, they're above that magic 40% red line, which we consider highly elevated. Wiz is also above that line, Zscaler and Snyk as well. But you see a lot of green here, which is an indication that there's strong spending momentum around a lot of tools. And we've got a spate of AI announcements in security. What are your thoughts? Explain your thoughts on the prediction and why you feel that despite the challenges in our previous reporting, the surveys that you guys did ahead of RSA that we reported on, Why do you think 2025 is going to be a year of platformization?
Pretty much because I'm expecting cybersecurity threats to reach an all-time high. Not dissimilar to what you were submitted and talked about earlier. We are really facing geopolitical tensions, geopolitical jockeying of positioning. The nation state actors are very much have access to compute at scale. They now have access to AI themselves. I expect not only the intensity of the attacks to increase, but I expect them to be continuous. And CISOs are facing a ton of pressure. And unfortunately, the best of breed approach, which you always wanted, takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of people to man and watch and operate and maintain. And when you have an E5 license with Microsoft and they can go ahead and roll out a platform approach, you're going to take it and then you're going to do point solutions and niche solutions where you need to fill it. So right now we're seeing really consolidating of strength around a Microsoft, a Palo Alto. You even saw Zscaler there, which started off as network access, but they're building their portfolio and adding so much more. I'd say Cloudflare to that list high up as well. Even though Wiz is still private, they're doing a lot more than just CNAP and CSPM. So people are moving more and more towards a single provider that can do multiple things because it's just impossible to keep up. So I really think that's what's happening with the CISOs. One unfortunate example is CrowdStrike, and whether or not it was their fault or not, or the Microsoft kernel, it happened, and they're doing the best they can to retain their customers. But we have multiple surveys and data points that say the main beneficiary of that event right now is Microsoft. And 4 or 5 years ago, that never would have been the case. Nobody would have thought Microsoft was good enough on the endpoint, and they wouldn't have migrated to them. But the data is clear, it's happening. So in short, what I expect to be the highest amount of cybersecurity threat in any annual year is going to drive platformization in cybersecurity.
Brad Shimon, last week on Breaking Analysis in our data gang predictions, he basically predicted that security is going to pop the AI bubble, or lack of security in all these, sort of agent rollouts. I hope he's wrong, but I like the prediction because it shines a light on the importance of security. His point being there's a lot of sort of stuff going on outside the purview of those qualified to secure platforms. And I don't think his prediction is going to come true. I mean, because we saw what happened with CrowdStrike last summer, and people they got through it. And so so I don't think it's going to pop the AI bubble, but I do think and I agree with you, that's why we have this prediction that the platformization is the right model and can support zero trust initiatives and ultimately simplify. Now, whether or not we're going to see a reduction in tools remains to be seen. Okay, our next prediction focuses on the buzzword of the day, which is agentic. We predict that there will be no aha moment for agentic AI in 2025 because of security and data privacy concerns. That will be a headwind. Now, to be clear, Erik and I, theCUBE Research, ETR, we are very excited about agentic. We just feel the hype is a bit ahead of reality, and there are clear successes taking shape. Salesforce is sort of guided that agents are going to add 2 points to its top line. ServiceNow is seeing momentum. So within these confined areas, I heard Carl Eschenbach talking about, Workday, and so they're going to have their agents, then they have the data. There's a lot of mixed reviews around Microsoft Copilots. I don't know if you have a thought there. I'd like to hear it if you do. But agents, they're being infused into all SaaS products. So think of agents as the next instantiation of LLMs 2.0, if you will. But rather than prompts from just humans, single prompts, agents are going to be pounding LLMs and models, enabling them to take action based on the context of the data. So the velocity of these prompts is going to go through the roof, maybe orders of magnitude. And as the AI stack evolves, it's going to involve multiple components that each have to have their own security capabilities. They've got their own security requirements. So stitching these pieces of the stack together creates seams, it increases risks, and it'll be, we think, a headwind that needs to be addressed. So again, Erik, I want to stress, we're not down on agents. We just see some work that has to be done, and we want to shine a light on the security issue here. Your thoughts?
100%, all in on agentic AI, and don't get me wrong. Basically what we're saying here is that it just hasn't reached the aha moment at wide scale across the enterprise. So some of the positives first. Significant indicators of increased spending, according to our most AI product recent survey that we did. Nearly half of respondents at 46% have actually found some ROI already, and over 86% plan to increase their spending over the next 12 months. So this is real. However, there are a lot of challenges. As you mentioned, there's privacy issues, security issues, IP issues that still need to be addressed. Furthermore, to your point about Copilot, a lot of times users will adopt this and then quickly abandon it because either it's inconsistent or proving wrong answers, or it's just not helping them as quickly as they need, or in some instances, they're not being trained, right? With Copilot, some people call it Clippy 2.0. It's there. The end user doesn't actually know how to use it. They try it once or twice, and then they just go about their job. So it's really hard to see widespread AI adoption. There's still challenges. Additionally, I would add where we are seeing success is a lot within internal use cases. So productivity improvements. We're not seeing it so much on client-facing outward use cases yet. So that's another reason why it's still just not there. All in all, adoption is growing. We believe in it. It just hasn't yet reached a transformative, or as we put it, the aha moment across enterprises yet.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving right along. Our next prediction relates to the narrative around cloud repatriation. We think that the cloud, the so-called, what we call repatriates, we think their narrative, it's really repatriation is largely a marketing narrative. We think that narrative is going to change toward on-prem AI. We think actually that's a better opportunity. The data we're showing here underscores that the cloud repatriation is really not a massive trend. Yeah, 15% of the customers in this survey are repatriating some of their workloads, but it's not an overwhelming revenue generator. So a more viable approach in our view is a narrative around bringing AI to the data, and we think that will overtake the repatriation narrative in 2025. In a recent CUBE research survey, we found that 58% of respondents plan to build their AI in their own private data centers. Of course, customers tell us they love the cloud, they love AWS, they love Bedrock, they love Google AI, and they're, of course, all of them are Microsoft users. But when you ask, well, then why are you building your own on-prem AI capabilities? They cite two things. One, that's where a lot of our data lives. And two, the cloud's expensive. And Erik, this sets up the edge, which is our next prediction, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Do you agree that repatriation is not really a thing, and it's really on-prem AI where the opportunities lie?
100% agree, but I'm remiss. You asked me a question directly and I didn't state it. So real quickly, ServiceNow, when you mentioned it, so our AI product series that we just launched, we're actually following the actual agentic AI to the product. ServiceNow had a 46% attach rate among its ServiceNow customers that we surveyed, and it was actually 87% by Copilot. So we're tracking things like attach rates, what the ROI is, what the value they're seeing is, and whether or not they're going to increase spend because of it. So you and I can dig into that a little bit. So I'm sorry, you asked me directly and I didn't answer it. So
no, that's all right. That's interesting. That again, clear indications that within those SaaS platforms, because you think about it, these SaaS platforms, they have data, they have process knowledge, they have business logic knowledge, they have metadata. It's right there to apply AI to. So I personally, I think they're in a very good position, and ServiceNow and Salesforce are two standouts that are notable. But please, over to you on the cloud front.
Yeah, we're tracking over 90 different instances on AI products, so we'll dig into that on another time. It's super interesting stuff, brand new for us. We just launched it in December. But here to this one, 100% agree. The data is just right there. Basically, only 15% of the people are saying that they're actually repatriating workloads. It's a very small amount. Now, of the ones that are doing it, the reasons are cost control, security compliance and performance concerns, and also latency. However, to your point, overwhelming majority of organizations are going to continue to leverage cloud infrastructures. I do not see cloud repatriation being anything more than a really fun discussion of topic and some marketing themes right now.
So that leads to our next prediction, which is around the edge. So these dovetail pretty nicely. So we see AI inference at the edge showing some real meaningful progress, revenue progress in 2025. Edge computing is going to, we think, be a significant trend that's going to shape the AI narrative. We all know that operating on data that is proximate to the source reduces latency, and the only way to do real-time processing is to put the data next to the processing power. We think it's going to, we're going to see momentum in robotics, the whole industry 4.0, automation, full self-driving, and retail is a big edge use case. We saw that at NRF just recently. So this is going to drive meaningful demand, we think, in 2025, and really want to stress that edge computing, we don't think it's going to detract from the public cloud or the on-prem data centers. We think it's actually going to enhance both. You're going to do the real-time processing, you're going to take some of the data, push it back to the cloud or to your data center to do more training. We also think that silicon is going to play a critical role, to the last point here in edge computing. Much to the, I think, dismay of a lot of people, I think NVIDIA is going to thrive at the edge. We think they've got a very strong edge strategy, but it's also going to open up new opportunities for the likes of AMD and Intel and RISC-V, who haven't been able to take NVIDIA on in the training. ARM obviously plays in NVIDIA and across the ecosystems, Qualcomm with AI PCs, and startups like Halo and Mythic and BrainChip and Horizon Robotics and many, many other startups. Grok is another one. The opportunities are so huge and so significant. And Erik, you guys did some work in this area on the edge and had responses from IT decision makers that really confirmed this prediction, didn't you?
Yeah, first of all, great slide. I really think everything you put in there explains the story really well in a robust manner. But yes, completely agree. To your point, in our macro survey, which had over 1,800 people, we asked in 4 different categories, asked people to write in what they believe their top trends for 2025 will be. That note's coming out next week. We had over 6,000 write-ins. And one of the main themes that came out of there was edge computing is going to see a lot of proliferation in 2025. And the main reason for that is that compute latency is and data volumes in general are basically acting as limiters for AI efficiency. And they need this real-time streaming analytics. They need this AI initiative to be closer to the edge, to their client-facing and to their decision makers. And this is all going to actually really enhance real-time data processing and support AI initiatives. And to your point, this is not going to detract from cloud. I believe it's a cloud plus edge play. If anything, and this is probably next year's prediction, I'll say that we're finally going to go from serverless just being talk to something that's actually starting to grow.
Great, thank you. Well, let's stay on cloud for a minute. This is prediction number 6. The public cloud is going to surpass $1 trillion in 2025 revenue. And here we're showing the XY data that we love to show from ETR net score by overlap or penetration in the data set. The bar chart insert shows the all-in cloud revenue from theCUBE research for IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Microsoft, you can see in the ETR data, is in the upper right, and would lead this chart. We think Microsoft's going to hit, when you add in Azure, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, is going to hit close to $200 billion this year in cloud revenue, which is larger than AWS's business, which really only competes in IaaS and PaaS. It's got a little bit in SaaS, things like Connect. AWS is going to be up above 130 billion this year, and Google will come in a little more than half of that. But as you can see on this ETR chart, Salesforce is going to probably contribute $50 billion or so. It also strikes me really interesting, Erik, to see CoreWeave on this chart. They're a new name in the survey, and they don't appear to be setting the world on fire from a momentum standpoint. And perhaps that's because these model trainers are using it. They're not necessarily the enterprises using it at this point anyway. So this is a potential opportunity for not only the CoreWeaves, the Neo clouds, but also the likes of Dell, HPE, Lenovo, and some of the on-prem folks, IBM, Oracle. Now, before Erik chimes in, let's bring up the next graphic, Alex, that speaks to the spending momentum behind the public cloud. Erik, walk us through this data and your thoughts on this prediction.
Yeah, so basically what we got here is the 4 areas of core spending we track. Cloud is by far the highest at 9.5% growth. SaaS is the second highest, but 50% behind it at 4.5% growth. Now, some of this is driven by price increases. One of the other things we track is we ask people where they're seeing vendors increase pricing as much, and they're seeing a 3% increase from their cloud providers. So some of that's being driven but the rest of it's being made up by an insatiable demand for compute, which again, to our previous point, refutes the broader hype around repatriation at this time. We're seeing almost double-digit growth in cloud spending. Real quickly, if you look at the top part of that chart too, we also saw an increase at the very, very high end, where basically more than 10% of the respondents are spending between 25 million to 100 million or more annually. Now, there's still more of those people that are on the regular side, but we're starting to see these really high-end spenders, these big high rollers. They're actually increasing from the previous surveys. So as more and more people need more and more compute, as they really push their AI demands, this is going to continue. And as you said, there's a full life cycle around that, whether it be the chips or the people that build the data centers or test the equipment. There's just a massive life cycle ecosystem derivative that's coming from this.
Great, thank you for taking us through that. Now, next up is a prediction a little bit counterintuitive. Specifically, we think AI supercharges RPA and is not a replacement. Now, early on, a lot of customers and industry pundits and the narrative was thinking that Gen AI in particular could do a lot of what RPA does. And so people were sort of tapping the brakes on their RPA investments, but we don't see it that way in the mid to long term. In fact, in many ways, we look at RPA as a very useful plumbing, if you will, for enterprise AI and automation. And the customer data confirms this. It suggests that they see AI as a complement to RPA, and capabilities like process mining or process mapping and workflow optimization and things like that are going to support agentic workflow. So on this ETR XY chart, you can see Microsoft again with Power Automate in the upper right. It's just unbelievable. They have both the spending momentum, the velocity, and the presence in the data set. And then you see a number of other firms like UiPath, which led the initial RPA market. They came in and made it simple and did really, really well there, but they're now positioning for agentic, as are the others on this chart. We're particularly excited about Celonis, which we've covered extensively on Breaking Analysis. Erik, how do you see it? What does the data tell you?
This is an interesting one because it was actually almost both were right. We did watch for a year and a half as business processes and RPA spending and spending trajectory continued to go down and down and down. However, there is a very quick and sharp rebound popping up. So although the likelihood was that AI was going to kill it and people stopped spending on it, now we're starting to realize that this is really more an augmentation and enhances RPA tools rather than replacing them. And I'm basing this on our proprietary observatory data, where we just recently released business processes and RPA, and the last two TSIS data sets. And forgive me for reading this, but there is something that came out of the last observatory one that I think is interesting. And it says, process automation and RPA are expected to benefit from AI rather than be displaced by it. AI is now seen as a complementary technology that enriches the capability of RPA, leading to what is often referred to as intelligent automation, or IA. This integration enhances the range of processes that can be automated, providing greater efficiency, accuracy, and flexibility. Additionally, AI is anticipated to improve process mining, business process mapping, and workflow optimization, all in all making more intelligent workflows. So the two are working hand in hand, whereas previously we thought that it was going to basically displace it. So in short, RPA is back, baby.
Yeah, and I want to double down on what you said, is I've written a lot, I both have talked a lot about RPA, and we did see as Gen AI ramped up, I mean, kind of everything came down in the taxonomy, but RPA in particular dropped down below that 40% mark, and now we're seeing it pop back up. So that's kind of interesting and exciting. And a lot of the RPA vendors sort of distanced themselves from the term, and it's like backup. People stop talking about backup, but that's fundamental. And I think RPA, robotic process automation, customers, resonates with them. And as I say, it's kind of the underpinning of a lot of these automation efforts. All right, let's talk IPOs, one of our favorite topics. Our next prediction is that IPOs are going to begin to come back in the first half, but really those companies that need the money are the ones that are going to go out in the first half. We think the others are going to wait and see what the impact of the Trump administration is, what happens with interest rates and the economy, et cetera. Here we're showing a sit down that we had at our NYSE studio with Veeam CEO, Anand Ishwaran. Veeam is owned by Insight Partners. They just did a private raise to take $2 billion. They took $2 billion at a $13 billion valuation off the table, and they're preparing for what we believe will be an IPO. Probably not this year, maybe in the second half, but probably more second half or middle of 2026. We don't think Veeam is in a big rush here. So they're probably one of those later IPOs. They've got plenty of cash. They've got positive cash flow, positive EBITDA. Same with Blue Yonder. We think that company's going to go out probably next year. Snyk, maybe second half of this year, maybe, but they're well funded also. Databricks, super well funded. And maybe some of the others to watch, Cohesity, Cerebras has indicated it's going public, and definitely could use the cash. Klarna, CoreWeave is another one, you saw them on an earlier chart. Companies like Chime, Netscope maybe, Neo4j, Stripe. We talked about Celonis. Erik, lots of companies waiting in the wings. And as you pointed out to me, including PE-owned firms, particularly in cyber and others, beyond Veeam, big pipeline that is just waiting to explode.
First of all, great list. When we first chatted about this, Thoma Brava came out and stole our thunder. The day after you and I put this on the post, they came out and said that they were going to take SailPoint public again after taking them private years ago.
Right.
I think you're going to see more of that. Several years back, we had big private equity players, and Thoma, Vista, Blackstone, just to name a few. They went out and they gobbled up a bunch of companies and took them private. Now, at a certain point, they need a liquidity event. They can't just keep running them for cash flow forever. So what we're seeing here with SailPoint, I think, is going to play out. Now, why do I think this year? Higher interest rates, insanely high private valuations during late stage capital raise means it can't just keep going on forever. You can't just keep playing the shell game and passing on that valuation. So we're seemingly getting to a point where PE/VC financing may be getting a little tired. So one really could make a solid argument that IPOs should pick up, given that private investors definitely need a liquidity event at some point. I mean, look, Wiz turned down $23 billion. We know they're coming out. They said that. That's an obvious one. To your point about Databricks, I actually think they like being private because I'm not so sure they always want to file all their numbers. They kind of, I think, like being a little bit more clandestine and playing that cloak and dagger game with their main competitor, Snowflake, who has no choice but to disclose everything. But the other list you mentioned is fantastic. But there's so many candidates ripe, for IPO this year, and I think this is the right year to start seeing it happening.
Excellent. And we're featuring a lot of those at our NYSE studios, and we'll do so throughout 2025. That is a lock prediction. Our ninth prediction is in the data space, one that we always like to hit on. But this one's interesting. The point of control, our prediction is the point of control is we're going to more clearly shift from the database layer up the stack towards governance catalogs that control open table formats. But the value we think is going to leapfrog that layer further up into the application stack, as we were talking about before, with Salesforce and the likes of ServiceNow, with agentic taking center stage. Now, notwithstanding the security challenges that we cited earlier. Now, but they can be better controlled by the application vendor. Now here we show data from August, an August ETR survey. It was a relatively small end, but there's some data that we wanted to share. The gray bar is the one that's relevant, where Iceberg, despite its newness, leads with the percentage of customers planning to use it. And we think this trend is going to dramatically accelerate in 2025 with Delta and Iceberg merging via Databricks, essentially Delta being subsumed by Iceberg because Databricks acquired Tabular, the developers of Iceberg, Ryan Blue leading that effort. And as the point of control shifts up the stack, the data platform players like Snowflake and Databricks are increasingly going to run into the likes of Salesforce and other SaaS players that are taking greater control over their data in their stacks that lives within their applications. These SaaS platforms, they have the data, they have the process knowledge, they have business logic, they have metadata, and they're in a strong position to vie for control of that data. Oracle might have some different things to say about the database control, but it doesn't matter because they're controlling the whole stack. But Erik, this will force new thinking beyond the ideas that were so prominent in the last 5, 6, 7 years of separating compute from data, cloud data warehousing, et cetera. And these trends we think are going to become more prominent in 2025, don't we?
Yeah, I definitely do. There's two things we're seeing here in our data. In a broad sense, we're actually seeing for the last couple of years, there was a lot of spending on infrastructure, on back end, setting up sort of the real-time data streaming analytics, setting up AI. We're seeing that spend starting to move a little bit more towards client-facing, forward-facing type of spend and investments, and also applications. So the other thing I'm seeing here, this reminds me of a few years back when self-service BI was the main thing, where IT departments didn't want to do BI anymore. They wanted to put it in the hands of the end user, whether that was sales or marketing or finance. And at that point, what ends up happening is it no longer is about where does my data sit. The strategic maturity of where the data sits has kind of been reached right now, at least for this curve. And what is happening is they're more concerned about how to improve that data, how do they make it relevant, discoverable, and control it and put governance around it properly. So that's where we're starting to see things like what they need their data scientists to be able to find and discover that data, which brings data catalogs into play, as you just mentioned it. They also need to share and repurpose that data. So that's where open table formats assist in that semantic layer. So I think it's just a natural evolution going from, okay, we spent years on our strategic initiatives around our database data warehousing plan. We've reached maturity there. Now let's move down the stack. So I fully believe in this one.
And you mentioned the semantic layer, and I just want to touch on that for a moment, and it relates to agentic. So within a closed application stack, whether it's Salesforce, which I know has many, many components like Slack and Tableau, but still they're all sort of feeding into the data cloud. Or you look at something like ServiceNow or Workday or many, many others. Because they have essentially control over that data, we think are in an advantage. Others, like Snowflake and Databricks, and of course Ali Ghodsi at Databricks is really the one who's popularized this notion of bringing any compute engine to any data. Well, that opens up kind of like the Wild West. If any compute can go to any data, well, how is that data harmonized? How is it made semantically meaningful, and who controls that? Is it a knowledge graph capability that gets built in? Certainly, some companies are doing that. Is it a third party like Celonis who's actually doing that harmonization, or relational AI? It's very unclear. And if a Snowflake and or a Databricks doesn't really own that layer of the stack, then they've got to rely on others to provide that value, and that is potentially a valuable piece of real estate. So that's something that we're going to watch to see how the competitive dynamic changes.
And it's not that different than what we saw with the old ETL layer, right? That middleware layer that we used to have within analytics, which, unfortunately kind of got gobbled up by the database data warehousing providers themselves. And it's very interesting you call out those two that are trying to get there before somebody disintermediates them. For the first time ever in recording the database data warehousing sector, Databricks and Snowflake are 1 and 2 in our entire sector positioning, overtaking AWS and Microsoft. So that's a first.
Interesting, and of course we saw AWS make a number of announcements at reInvent, basically creating a sort of abstraction layer over SageMaker, doing S3 open table formats, and so they're leaning into this. So the cloud guys within their own space are going to they're so convenient for them, and they've got such a machine, go-to-market machine, that they're going to get their fair share as well. So, but the good news is,
people always like to point out, even if you are running Databricks or Snowflake, you're still getting a cut to the hyperscalers. So
right, exactly.
They're making their money no matter what.
Absolutely, they take their toll, but the market is enormous. Okay, last prediction is one that addresses some of the media hype around jobs, and maybe somewhat counterintuitive, which is prediction number 10. We don't believe AI is going to dramatically kill jobs in a noticeably manner in 2025 and spike unemployment. We think longer term, AI is going to create more jobs that require, of course, different skill sets. This data that we're showing here is from an ETR survey that Erik's going to talk about, and a new feature that they've announced, and we've highlighted in red the salient responses, where 600 customers said they're not slowing hiring. They disagree that hiring is slowing. That's the left side of this bar. And they're not slowing hiring due to AI, and they're not reducing headcount. So Erik, kindly explain this data and the new capabilities that you've launched at ETR.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to do so. So basically in late November, early December, we launched for the first time what we're calling the AI product series. As you know, Dave, for years, we've already been tracking what we called the state of Gen AI, which was really tracking broad levels of evaluations, user metrics, barriers to entry. We've realized now that that's not really the case. This is already happening. Agentic AI is out there. The products are out there. So we've pivoted to not only tracking the broad-based AI trends, but also 90 plus products at the AI level. This was part of the first survey. The second part actually launched today, and then we'll have a third. So getting back to the prediction, love bucking a headline when I can. And yes, we have seen some instances where company layoffs were made or blamed on AI as a convenient excuse. But in this survey right now, we are seeing a trend where I do not believe AI is going to disintermediate jobs this year. Of all the options we listed here, only two did the survey respondents not agree with. And that is that AI spending and their initiatives is not going to slow hiring, nor is it going to reduce headcount. And the reduce headcount one was a sizable measure. So right now we're looking at, a real bucking of the trend here. And at least for this year, we actually believe not only will it slow it, but it's going to continue to actually pace it, because you need human beings, you need intelligent people to actually make this work. So yeah, for right now, and I hope for a long time, because it is a concern for a lot of people that AI will displace jobs. But for right now in 2025, not going to happen.
I liked how you worked that in, where you have definitely seen some companies who said, yeah, who've had layoffs, said, oh yeah, we're getting productivity out of AI, which maybe makes for good press releases, but is perhaps not the case. Maybe the AI ROI is not quite there yet, and that's why some of the customers are saying they're not reducing headcount, and maybe that will change. I mean, I would expect at some point you're going to see, a trough in hiring, certainly a slowdown in hiring if in fact AI productivity picks up, but then I think you're going to see a rapid escalation, as you normally do with new technologies in requiring new skill sets.
If I may, real quickly, the ROI is super intriguing. We are tracking ROI, and what we're finding out, the only time people are really confident in ROI is in a perception basis. It's not yet dollar-based. There's no hard metrics for tracking ROI. People are saying, oh, I believe there's a perception of increased productivity. I believe we're maybe putting out a slightly better product and quality. But there is yet to really seen any hard metric ROI from AI in our data just yet. We're hoping that this is the year that starts to turn around, particularly in the second half. But to your point right now, there is no hard concrete ROI. And many of the people we ask say their organization's not even trying to track it yet.
I saw a survey from Apptio. In fact, I'm doing a webinar with them later on next month. And it showed that the value that customers, and it was a big N, it was like over 1,000 N, and it was international, and it was a big survey. But the number one value that customers said they expected was revenue generation. And I was like, whoa, I mean, unless you're Salesforce or, NVIDIA, you're not really seeing revenue from AI quite yet. Now, perhaps over time, but I would think productivity, headcount reduction or maybe headcount avoidance is really going to be the initial one. But to your point, it's elusive right now. And look we have to be honest here. When Satya Nadella stands up at Davos and says, I'm good for 80 billion, that in many respects is what's driving the AI wave right now.
Yeah, very good point. I don't see it as revenue facing. We've been tracking this data for over 2 years, and all of the use cases are internal facing. They don't trust it on a revenue facing place yet. So yeah, interesting comment to make. I don't think we're there. I disagree with that.
All right, hey, we got to go. Erik, awesome working with you again. I really appreciate it. As we just keep rolling with the predictions and the data. You guys are doing such an awesome job. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the partnership and the collaboration as always.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, we're going to leave it right there for now. I want to thank Alex Meyerson and Ken Schiffman on production and in our podcast. Kristen Martin and Cheryl Knight help get the word out on social media and in our newsletters. And Rob Hof is our EIC over at SiliconANGLE.com. Thank you all. Remember, all these episodes are available as podcasts wherever you listen. All you got to do is search Breaking Analysis Podcast. I publish each week on thecuberesearch.com and SiliconANGLE.com. You can email me at david.vellante@siliconangle.com or DM me at dvellante. Comment on our LinkedIn posts and check out etr.ai. They're constantly innovating. They release a fire hose of data. It feels like daily. It is daily, actually. Best survey data in the business. Check it out. This is Dave Vellante for Erik Bradley and for theCUBE Research Insights powered by ETR. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on Breaking Analysis.